Hey, good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. You know, there have been a lot of lies told by many of our institutions. The misinformation and disinformation comes from some of the most well-credentialed organizations on the planet. Much of it is paid for by your tax dollars, unfortunately. And that includes at the United States State Department, which apparently has been funding anti-Israel propaganda for some time now. For more on that, I want to bring in Chuck Ross, who has the brand new report on this. He's an investigative reporter for the Washington Free Beacon. Chuck, good to have you with us today, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so what has the government been up to? They spend a lot of time obsessing over how they can censor American citizens, and you know you're not allowed to be mistaken on the internet, or else the government's going to come after you. What is the government getting wrong?
Yeah. Obviously, during the Biden administration, there's been an effort to fund anti-disinformation, anti-fake news initiatives. They pay think tanks and nonprofits or whatever to track disinformation or what they perceive to be disinformation, whether it be about COVID or Russia collusion or any of these things. The State Department got in on this game as well. They funded a bunch of different programs. We tracked down a grant, two grants actually that were given at the beginning of October to fight disinformation and fake news, is the term they use, fake news in the Middle East, specifically in Jordan and in the area around there. So one of the organizations they gave around $600,000 to, it's called MENA Action. And one grant is to help society protect against disinformation. The other is to teach Jordanian journalists how to spot fake news. And it turns out we did some digging on this organization, and their leaders have done the same thing that they're supposed to be fighting. They spread fake news about the Israel-Hamas war. Specifically, they've floated the false story from Hamas that Israel bombed a hospital there in Gaza. They've, accused Israel of genocide, used all the inflammatory allegations against Israel you can think of, which are all, disinformation, if you will, because, Israel's not committing genocide. It's an actual legal definition of what that term means. We thought it was an interesting thing because, for one, the government, the Biden administration, has gone all in on fighting disinformation. And it's just a cherry on top that an organization they hired is pushing disinformation about this particular war.
You mentioned that one of the ways that you would, prevent bad information from getting to the public if you were a journalist would be to, you would hesitate. You would say, okay, well, let me actually gather the facts first before I share with the public the conclusions. But that's not what this organization appears to be doing. They instantly were retelling a lie, apparently because it served their political agenda. And American taxpayer dollars, this is not one of those issues where we voted on this particular subject. It's not like Joe Biden ran on, hey, if you give me money, I'm going to make sure to fund organizations that lie about Israel. And yet that's precisely what's happening here.
Yeah, and it just goes to show just how little vetting they do of these organizations. And one example we put in our story at the Washington Free Beacon was, we've talked about it a bunch, the Disinformation Governance Board that they tried to prop up last year, the Department of Homeland Security with Nina Jankowicz. And some people did a quick digging and found that she pushed fake news about the Hunter Biden laptop and about Russia collusion and Trump and all these things. So, you and I have talked about this quite a bit on your show, and it always points in the same direction. It's always the disinformation that these organizations push is always tends to be anti-conservative or anti-America to an extent, and also anti-Israel or any of these things. And so it's a pattern. And,
it's really about their, if you want to call them this, their values. It's not fundamentally about whether the story is true or not. It's about whether or not it's morally correct in their view.
Yeah, exactly. And, I don't know what's going to happen with this particular grant. The State Department did not respond to us to say anything about if they plan to go forward with the funding. The organization we wrote about, MENA Action, the guys that we talk about in our story, they quickly deleted their social media posts where they, push this fake news.
It's unbelievable. It's always like,
yeah.
they didn't, issue a statement. They didn't apologize. Oh, we got that one wrong. It was just memory hole. That's the only move.
Yeah, and that's usually how this stuff goes. I mean, going back to Nina Jankowicz, she kind of got caught in a firestorm because, but usually these organizations can just kind of ignore it, hope it doesn't get a whole bunch of traction, and then move on. State Department's not going to acknowledge the error, is my guess. But this is a very serious issue too. I mean, disinformation, if you want to use that term, it's misused, but it is hugely prevalent in this war in particular, and throughout the Middle East. And to be giving American dollars to an organization that is going to potentially help spread anti-Israel and anti-American propaganda in the Middle East, that's bad. I think.
You are right. You are right about the way they react to this, though, having seen it a lot. And I know you have, too, especially given your role in holding these guys accountable. But you'll publish a story, and you'll point out their social media posts or some of the things that they've published or said or appeared in the past. And then the answer to it is they'll just delete it. They'll just try and make it disappear from the internet, and so that nobody can further hold them accountable, with the expectation that the media at large, besides the Washington Free Beacon and a couple of other places, like a radio show like this one, they aren't going to mention it. And every single time, the New York Times, for instance, answers the call not to talk about these stories, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't expect the New York Times to jump on this one. Absolutely, that's just how it goes.
But it's a world. They're building a world of deceit. So they don't. These legacy outlets, they don't cover these things because they're on their same side politically. So what they're really doing is advancing a deceptive agenda. Yeah,
it's lies by omission, I guess, is the term you use for this. New York Times and other outlets, they choose what and what not to report on.
Exactly.
They're not going to point because as you said a minute ago, it's not that everyone at the New York Times believes that Israel's committing genocide, but I think liberal press, the government as well, they are more than willing to be critical of Israel at this point, and making the inflammatory rhetoric isn't as bad as if it would have been, on the other side, conservatives saying something negative like that. So
let me move to a different subject where there is memory holing going on again on the left. There's an organization called the Council for American Islamic Relations, CAIR, and many years ago they were found to be an unindicted co-conspirator in terrorism. And yet Washington has treated this organization as a very legitimate one for many years, as if it was the voice of Muslim Americans everywhere. And it went so far as the White House had included CAIR in its panels on, what was it, anti-Semitism? They were a part of the groups helping to advise the White House on anti-Semitism. Is that right?
Yeah, and back in May, the White House picked, alongside groups like the Anti-Defamation League and other Jewish groups, they picked CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, to be on their it's called the National Strategy for Combating Anti-Semitism.
Okay.
And it's just wild that this group, and everyone's known for years that CAIR has, a front for Hamas at some point.
So what is this, like a Scared Straight program where they bring an ex-con in? They're like, don't be anti-Semitic like me.
It sounds about right. I don't know.
So this CAIR. So here's where I'm going with this. After October 7th, there was the terror attack in Israel. It didn't come to light until last week that the CAIR executive director here in the United States of America, a guy called Nihad Awad, was speaking at a convention, and he praised the terror attack on October 7th. And it just so happens we have audio of this. Take a listen to his praise of a terror attack on Israel.
The people of Gaza only decided to break the siege the walls of the concentration camp on October 7th. And yes, I was happy to see people breaking the siege and throwing down the shackles of their own land and walk free into their lands that they were not allowed to walk in. And yes, the people of Gaza have the right to self-defense, have the right to defend themselves. And yes, Israel as an occupying power does not have that right to self-defense.
Israel does not have a right to self-defense, and he makes a justification for the rape, murder, and kidnapping of Israeli citizens. First of all, what kind of event was he speaking at? And then how is the White House explaining their relationship with this guy?
He was speaking at a convention right after Thanksgiving for a group called the American Muslims for Palestine. They're another pro-Hamas organization, very similar to CAIR. There's a lot of these groups kind of work together a lot, and they're always appearing at each other's events and stuff like that. And yeah, and surprisingly, the White House did respond after this came out, because that's how bad his statement was. Nahal Awad's statement was that the White House was forced basically to respond and denounce it and all this. To my knowledge, though, I don't really think they've addressed why they picked CAIR in the first place to serve on their National Task Force to fight anti-Semitism. They still not explain that. And the thing that's mind-boggling to me about that is that, as I said a minute ago, people who pay attention to this stuff know what CAIR is and what they've always been, what they've always advocated for. They've always been anti-Israel. So how the Biden administration decided to put them on that anti-Semitism task force is still unexplained. And then the White House scrubbed their website of any mention of them. And today I found, I was just looking around at CAIR, they had as of the other day, a list of about 120 Democrats, mostly Democrats, people like Chuck Schumer, Tim Kaine, prominent Democrats who have given them praise. They've quoted them, all the praise that CAIR has received over the years. So CAIR removed that from their website as of the other day. And so now it's kind of like CAIR's a different.
CAIR removed Chuck Schumer's praise for their organization from their own website?
Yeah. Well, it was a list. There's Chuck Schumer and then, 100 plus Democrats who have over the past 5 years or so praised CAIR. And so CAIR removed that. And I don't know.
You think they voluntarily?
Why they did that? But
you think they voluntarily just were like removing compliments from their website? That doesn't. I know you don't. I know you don't think that. But I'm just watching this going. It seems pretty obvious to me what's happening here. You've got Chuck Schumer's staff frantically reaching out to CAIR, saying you need to remove our endorsement of you from that website. And then everyone. This is once again the memory hole in action. They're just shoving all of this down, and they're hoping that nobody notices that Chuck Schumer once gave full-throated endorsements to an organization that has been connected to both terrorism and basically celebration, and not basically, literally celebration of terrorism on October 7th.
Yeah, and the thing, actually, not to go into Chuck Schumer here, but he's been on both sides of CAIR. If you look back 15 plus years ago, he talked in Congress about CAIR's ties to Hamas and their funding for help to fund terrorism and all these things. And then ever since, last year, actually, he gave praise. He sent a little note, a congratulatory note to CAIR, thanking them for their civil rights work and all this stuff. And CAIR in turn uses that quote and others to help raise money, essentially what they're doing. So it just shows you the hypocrisy, I guess, that these guys know, Chuck Schumer knows, the White House knows, all the Democrats who support CAIR know what they are, but they've still, supported them up until their leader says something that's so inflammatory that they can't ignore it.
It's amazing. It really is. Well, thank you, as always, Chuck, for covering all of this aggressively, and we really appreciate your time, as always. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And Chuck Ross over at the excellent Washington Free Beacon. Let's go to the phones. We've got Walt calling in from Gaithersburg now on line 3. Walt, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Thank you very much. I want to fill in a few facts and give you a website. CAIR used to be called the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood goes back to like 1938, and they helped Hitler kill Jews during World War II. Also, Barack Obama.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood still exists, though, Walt, right?
Well, yeah, but they call it CAIR here. They don't call it the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, because Egypt and the United Arab Republic or whatever have marked them as terrorists, the Muslim Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
But really, CAIR is the same thing.
And CAIR has worked to protect the Muslim Brotherhood from terror designations here in the United States.
Yeah, that's what I say. But I mean, the billionbibles.org is my source. You can read about Sharia law, Muslim Brotherhood. You can read about CAIR and the project for overtaking the world. So you can read all about that. But I don't know if your guest knew all of that. He should have brought that out in the subject too.
Chuck Ross knows a great deal, but all of us are always learning. That's one of the things I've learned as I've gotten older, Walt. I never know it all. I appreciate your call, though.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Do that. Read about Sharia law and the project.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Billionbibles.org.
Thank you.
Billionbibles.org.
Billionbibles.org. Thanks, Walt. I appreciate that, sir. Appreciate the always good to get some homework, get some things to work on. Let me see here. I've got Mike, who's been waiting very patiently, calling in from Gainesville now on line one. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince Coglianese. Happy Monday.
Same to you, sir. What's on your mind?
It's certainly been an interesting afternoon for phone calls. We got a lot of learning to do.
Yeah, we always do. My wife is always telling me that. I've got some things I've got to learn.
But I was watching Fox News dutifully this weekend, and Ron Williams broke out the lie that Beau Biden died in Iraq, in the Iraq War.
Oh, did he say that? He said that out loud. He's just internalizing Joe Biden lies.
Well, he's trying to garner sympathy for both Hunter and Joe himself. That's what the Moby interview was all about how they're trying to kill Hunter so that Joe will be so despondent that his presidency will fall apart. But now they're adding to it by saying that he already lost a son in the war in Iraq. That was the quote that Juan said, the falsehood. And
So
no one on the panel, no one ever corrected him. No one said that's debunked. That's not true. He died in the hospital.
It drives you crazy. And then there you are yelling at your TV screen. Come on, somebody say something. I don't blame you, Mike. Yeah, come on, Juan. But, I mean, look, you can be a lefty, but don't lie about it. Don't tell people the guy died in Iraq when he didn't die in Iraq. He died right here in the United States of America. The man had cancer. It's amazing what they'll say. It's amazing what they'll say to advance their agenda. There's no limits whatsoever. Hey, coming up on the program, we got a lot more for you. The Tranifesto, remember that? It was supposed to, and then it leaked. Elements of it leaked, and it turned out it was exactly as awful as we expected. The cops announced that they would search for whoever leaked it. The results of that investigation ahead, and so much more. Hey, good afternoon to you. 536 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us and educate me at 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Susanna Gibson. You remember that name? Did you ever pay her any money? Susanna Gibson was the porn actress turned congressional candidate, Virginia State House of Delegates candidate, who lost her election because people found out about her porn career. Yeah, and now she's the victim of this entire saga. Did you know that? She's the victim here. Politico magazine, is that a real magazine or just what they call long-form political articles? I don't actually know if they have a physical magazine or not, but one way or the other, they refer to it as the magazine. And the headline on the piece is, her online sex life was exposed. She lost her election. Now she's speaking out. And it's written by a guy called Alexander Burns, who is apparently the head of news at Politico. So that's as high as it gets. He's the head of news. All news. He's in charge of it at Politico. He writes, it's not often that a state legislative campaign in an off-season election seizes the national spotlight, but that is what happened in September when the Washington Post revealed that a promising Virginia Democrat, Susanna Gibson, had previously been captured in a recorded video performing sex acts online with her husband. Immediately, okay, that's the first paragraph. Immediately, passive voice. Immediately. which is you're not supposed to do in journalism unless you're trying to conceal something. And clearly they're concealing something here. She wasn't, quote, captured in a recorded video. She recorded videos of herself performing sex acts online in exchange for money. Now, you'll notice as this piece goes on that it doesn't actually address any of those underlying issues. It doesn't even really acknowledge the details here. This is how it goes. Gibson, a 40-year-old nurse practitioner, was running in one of the most competitive elections in the state, a race for a Richmond area seat in the House of Delegates that had the potential to determine whether Democrats or Republicans would control the chamber. There was unusual national interest in Virginia's elections, yada, yada, yada. The video, a recording of an explicit live stream that the Post said had been uploaded elsewhere on the internet, had been shared by a Republican political operative, according to the paper. The Post's report upended Gibson's life, to say nothing of her candidacy. Quote, "I'm fundamentally changed as a human, having gone through something like that," she said in an interview. The episode also detonated a debate in Virginia and beyond about digital and sexual privacy in 21st century politics. Let me just reiterate this point. She filmed this for public consumption in exchange for money on the internet. That's what actually happened. Now, I'm going to play some very heavily censored audio for you right now. This is just to remind you of what this video, again, that she posted for public consumption sounded like.
Oh, man. I want to see. I can't believe you got me.
Jeez.
That's everything we could share. That's as much as we could share. Obviously, you could tell what was going on there by that audio. But she says she's fundamentally changed as a human, having gone through all of this. And of course, Politico says this has detonated a debate about digital privacy. In a possible reflection of shifting social norms, Gibson nearly won the race anyway. Shifting social norms, collapsing moral, standards. Maybe the explanation for that. In a sign of immense moral decay, Gibson nearly won the race. She lost by less than 1,000 votes. She's not ruled out a return to electoral politics in the future. To explore the difficult social and legal questions that churn through Virginia politics, Politico magazine spoke with Gibson about her experience in the campaign and the implications of that race for a larger cohort of younger candidates. Oh, see, now she's here to help the youth. Her experience is going to be instructive to young people everywhere. Here's the question from Politico, from Alexander Burns. The last 3 months of a campaign are just a blur. Can you talk about what that experience was like for you, having to do the home sprint of a campaign with this other issue on top of it? He said, with this other issue on top of it. That's how he worded the question. Quote, "My entire life was rocked on September 11th when the article ran," she says. "It ran implying that I performed sex acts online with my husband for money." No, it didn't imply that. It declared it. In fact, the Washington Post piece on this subject, the headline was, "Virginia Democrat House candidate performed sex online with husband for tips." Dateline Richmond, a Democrat running for a crucial seat in Virginia's House of Delegates, performed sex acts with her husband for a live online audience and encouraged viewers to pay them with tips for specific requests, according to the online videos viewed by the Washington Post. They go on to give some detail that I'll spare you. But they do say that Gibson, at the age of 40, can be seen in the videos soliciting tips for performing specific acts, in apparent violation of the website's term and conditions, which say, quote, "Requesting or demanding specific acts for tips may result in a ban from the platform for all parties involved." In at least 2 videos, she keeps telling the viewers she is, quote, "raising money for a good cause." In multiple videos, Gibson interrupts sex acts to type into a bedside computer, speaking directly into the screen. She urges viewers to provide tips, which are paid through tokens purchased through the site. In at least 2 videos, she agrees to perform certain acts only in a private room, which is an arrangement that requires the viewer to pay more. Quote, "I need more tokens before I let him do that," she responds to a request that they perform a certain act. Quote, "1 token? No, more. Raising money for a good cause," she wrote, in a state of complete undress. So this is what are they describing here? What is this description? Will perform sex acts for money. I believe that's prostitution. Or at least, as an old friend of mine used to say, video prostitution when it involves online pornography. Video prostitution. So her entire life was rocked that the public was aware of these videos that were made for public consumption. My life was rocked, she said. I didn't have any idea that there were ever videos of me that had been made and uploaded to multiple sites. Wait, you did? You definitely knew there was a camera in front of you. You knew you were talking to people on the internet. You knew you were soliciting money from them. Come on. Use your brain. She claims that she was in a clinic on September 7th seeing patients, because remember, she's a nurse practitioner, when she was contacted by reporters. And she was upset about this. And she said that they spent a few days fighting with the Post to try and stop this from coming out. She's been referring to this as an invasion of her privacy. She gets asked, quote, "You said invasion of your privacy. How much do you feel like people in general should be free to live really separate lives online?" What kind of question is this? And the entire political piece never once acknowledges the details that even the Washington Post acknowledged, that she was posting these videos and getting paid for them, that she was the reason they were online. And she says this, quote, "I think what people do in their private lives digitally, if it is legal, it is consensual, and has no bearing on their ability to do their jobs. I think there should be a barrier. I think that it is unethical to make people's private lives, especially their sexual private lives, public and part of how we think about them and their ability to do their jobs and make positive contributions to their communities." Well, this was, once again, not a private affair. It was a public one. And the voters may be interested to know that the woman who's running for elective office was selling her body on the internet. Quote, "The part that strikes me as tricky is that this is the Political Reporter, is that there are certainly things that people do online that we do want to be able to assess in a political context or make part of the public record on that person, right?" She responds, if it has to do with policy. If it has to do with policy. Anyway, on and on. She's the victim here. This whole saga is like, this is like the Hunter Biden story. Who's the real victim in this story? Well, the person who was held accountable is the victim. The person who was scrutinized. The person whose history of public activity involving selling her body was discovered and shared more broadly. She's the victim. Oh, Susanna. Oh, Susanna. Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for you. It turns out when they give you cash, there's nothing you won't do. Susanna Gibson. So, anyway, one of my favorite, I don't know if we ever played the clip of this, and I was just going through the files because I wanted to find, that hilarious hyper-censored Susanna Gibson file. But when Tim Kaine found out about this, did you ever hear this audio? Senator Tim Kaine found out about how one of his fellow Democrats was caught producing porn on the internet and selling herself. So this is what Tim Kaine had to say about it when he was asked at the time.
Yeah, this is my first press interaction since this story came out a little bit over a day ago. I'm in my office, and this is a Senate official thing, not a campaign thing, but I can respond briefly. I was very surprised at this story. I was at a campaign event in Henrico with many local and state candidates, school board, county supervisor, constitutional officers.
Notice, by the way, just that he's describing his surprise, and then he's just giving various boring descriptions of where he was.
House and Senate members on Saturday, and Ms. Gibson was one of the candidates. As far as I know, it's the first time I met her, and it's a little bit unusual because she's one of the few General Assembly candidates who's never asked me for an endorsement. So I don't really know her that well, but I was very, very, very surprised at the story. And it really took me aback. I heard from somebody, this event was Saturday midday. I heard from somebody very late Saturday or early Sunday.
I heard from somebody. I was very surprised. I was at a campaign event this weekend.
A negative story might be coming, but when I read it yesterday, I mean, it was very surprising.
Were you surprised? Was it very surprising when you found out about it? How surprised were you?
Yesterday, I mean, it was very surprising.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So no opinion on whether or not that she should continue her campaign.
Over the last minute, you've given me literally nothing. Can you tell me whether she should drop out of the race?
Look, she hasn't even asked me for an endorsement, and so or any advice about this. And
well, she hasn't asked me for advice. So
the stories, as far as
was it surprising to you?
As I have read the stories I've read, her comment has been, "Don't invade my privacy." So I don't even really feel like I know some facts as they're reported, but I don't know all of them. But again, it was a very surprising.
It was surprising.
thing to read about it. And again, I
Surprise!
don't really have much sense of it because, as far as I know, it's the first time we'd met, and I hadn't even been asked to endorse it.
She hasn't even asked me for an endorsement, so how could I render a judgment? Did Trump ever ask you for an endorsement, Tim Kaine? Because he's like perfectly willing to judge that guy. But he hasn't. No, Trump never asked me for an endorsement. When I saw the news about him, I was very surprised. It was very surprising. So that's the senator from Virginia reacting to all of this. I do have an update from Nashville, and a previously promised update from Nashville for you, where the cops there say that they were looking into who exactly leaked that Tranifesto. And it's not the whole Tranifesto, it's just a couple of pages. Was it Steven Crowder who first got his hands on the pages? I think it was. And so he gets a couple of pages from the Tranifesto, and that's the name of the shooter was Audrey Hale. This was a woman who imagined herself to be a boy, right? Do I have that right? That's the proper description. Yeah, a woman who thought she was a man, and she went up and she shot this Christian school up in an act of, in many ways, obviously anti-Christian bigotry. She then laid out in some detail why she did it and how deranged she was in this Tranifesto, and kind of everything you expected was in there. And there's still many pages that have not been made public. Well, the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department began an investigation into who leaked this. They wanted to identify the leaker, and of course, make them suffer consequences for sharing with the public something that should have been shared a long time ago. And the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department announced the following on Friday. They have exhausted all available investigative avenues to identify who leaked the Covenant School Shooters Manifesto, according to their press release. This is the Daily Caller writing here. The MNPD chief, John Drake, confirmed the investigation into finding the person responsible for leaking 3 pages of elementary school shooter Audrey Hale's manifesto and has not identified any current Nashville Police Department employees or employees of any partner agency. The investigation has not identified current Nashville Police Department employees or employees of any partner agency as engaging in the unauthorized release of the images, per the press statement. Persons placed in administrative assignment for certain periods during the pendency of the investigation have returned to their regular duties. However, authorities did highlight an unidentified former employee, as well as 2 detectives assigned to the Specialized Investigations Division. The unidentified former employee allegedly, quote, possessed the images due to their official duties, but declined an interview with the department. What this sounds like, in part, it does kind of sound like the police chief didn't really want to make anyone suffer for releasing this. He probably did think that it was the kind of thing that people deserve to know. But they've decided to end the investigation, so there will not be, at least as far as we can see from here, any punishment for whoever was transparent about this, shared those 3 pages with the public. But, boy, we should really see the rest of it, shouldn't we? I mean, the left, we see so many of these manifestos from various shooters, and the left often will ascribe it to some right-wing. Oh, it's a right-wing ideology. But, of course, if you read any of these manifestos, it's almost always some sort of eco-terrorist or communist sympathizer or Trump hater or whatever. Like, you read, you read a little bit into it, you're like, this is not what the media told me at all. This is a completely different thing. And, of course, just imagine what's contained within the Tranifesto outside of the 3 pages we've seen. Of course, not the kind of story the New York Times really wants to tell you in terms of getting to the bottom of why things like this happen and how we can stop them. But I think the public has a right to know. The people of Nashville have a right to know, certainly. All right, let's take a phone call. I've got Rick calling in from Reston, line 3. Rick, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Yeah, hey, Vince, thank you so much for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I was riding in my car, and I started laughing, chuckling slowly when you were playing that iterative clips of the august Senator Kaine talking about the candidate for the legislature.
Susanna Gibson, yes.
Yes, and the more he said, I don't know anything about this. This is surprising. I don't know. And why are you asking me? I mean, my gosh, this is amazing. It was so surprising. I mean, I don't know her. She never asked me for anything. She didn't get no endorsement like that.
Uh-huh.
I just started thinking, he sounds an awful lot like he might have been like an online customer or he might have had some other kind of relationship with her.
Yeah, Susanna who?
I've been evaluating employees and friends and neighbors when they're trying to BS their way out of something.
It sounds, you're right. You're right about this, Rick. Your spidey senses are up for a reason. There's something going on here. Never heard of her. Don't look at my internet history, but I don't even know who she is. The great one, Mark Levin, up next.